Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about pinballs, and we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to talk about pinball, and we're going to talk about unlockable players, or unlockable players. Yeah. All right, let's get into this. So this is an idea I have for a Dungeons and Dragons game, and I'm going to share it with you. And the idea came to me because I've been thinking about Dungeons and Dragons through the filter of pinball. I've been playing pinball a lot lately. And why am I playing pinball? Well, first of all, I had a friend about 2-3 years ago. We're no longer friends. We had a bad fallout over a game of dice thrown. Yeah. Anyway, this person is no longer my friend, but they introduced me to pinball. They would talk. This person was a good friend of mine. We're no longer friends, but he talked about pinball all the time. And so I knew a lot about pinball because of him. So pinball machines are still popular today, and most pinballs you can buy them today for between about $5,000 and $15,000, right? Real pinball machines. And generally, there aren't a lot of new pinball machines are like railroads. Definitely still around, definitely loved, definitely maintained, but you don't really see a lot of new ones made, right? It's kind of a vintage product, right? But you can buy these used pinball machines for about between $5,000 and $15,000. Most pinball machines are sell around the $7,000 to $8,000 mark, right? And he would talk about it all the time because he had this goal of buying a pinball machine, which I was like, that sounds kind of crazy. And then we also talked about going into Philadelphia to a hall that had pinball machines, right? But we never did it. We actually got together. Everything was set to go this one weekend, and then something fell through on their side. This is all during the March 2020 problem. It was hard to go anywhere or do anything, and so the whole thing fell apart, and we never went to play pinball. But recently, I go to a little town close to me, and I've been getting bubble tea, and the whole place it's actually near a courthouse, and it's just packed full of rich lawyers, right? So this bubble tea shop is amazing, and they just got. It's called, they just got a shop that is all vintage video games and pinball machines. And for $6, you walk in, you put your $6 down, and you get 30 minutes straight, and all the pinball machines and the vintage video games, the actual video game, not cartridge, but like the actual old 1980s video games like Pac-Man and Karate Champ, and a million other old video games. They're all free play, right? So I've been playing pinball, and I absolutely love it. Now, they have I think they have 6, maybe 8 different pinball machines at the place. They're all fantastic. But I've been jamming on the Buck Rogers pinball machine. Guess why? It's Dungeons and Dragons, right? So Gary Gygax left TSR in 1986, and he made a decision. He said, this is the person I want to carry TSR forward. We're going to be progressive, right? And I'm going to make, and as I step out, so Gary Gygax said, with his actions, right? As I leave, I am now going to make TSR the most progressive tabletop role-playing game company in the world. And it's going to have a female CEO, which no other company has right now. No other TSR company, no other TTBRG company has. I'm going to stand for progressiveness and make sure the person who leads TSR forward into the future is a woman. Because I am progressive, Gary Gygax, right? Like, he said this with his actions. He did it. He made it. He made it law, right? And in addition to that, he's like, I'm for social justice, right? And and he made sure that for the next 11 years, he was D&D from 1974 to 1986, and he's like, from 1986 to 1997 for the next decade. This, he made sure that from 1986 to 1997, unlike any other tabletop role-playing game on the planet, tabletop role-playing game company on the planet, it would be helmed by a woman. And that woman was actually the owner at the time of Buck Rogers, right? She owned the rights to Buck Rogers. And so I play the Buck Rogers game because I love D&D, and Buck Rogers is intimately entwined with the history of Dungeons and Dragons, right? So, as I've been playing pinball, I've been thinking a lot about pinball, but never far from my mind is D&D. And so when I'm playing pinball, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get this. I'm starting to get better at this. I'm starting to understand pinball. When you hit the flippers, right, the ball goes forward. The ball in D&D world is the player. They make everything happen. The world means nothing. Nothing clicks, nothing dings, nothing happens in a D&D world without the player, right? Without the player character. I'm sorry, the player character. The ball is the player character, right? And that ball goes through channels, right? These metal rails that swirl around, and you got to hit this little opening, and then the ball goes into a metal rail, and it swirls around and goes on a course, right? And sometimes in our games, the player characters for a limited amount of time is on a rail. Their choices are very limited. They're just going through a chute, right? Then there are these routes, right? These light routes. So basically, at the top of the machine, on a lot of machines, there'll be these little channels that the balls will simply fall through. And at the top on the machine I'm seeing, it says buck, B-U-C-K, right? And if your ball goes down the B route, it shuts off the B light, right? If it goes down the U route, it shuts off the U light. If it goes down the K route, it shuts off the K light, right? And you got to shut down buck, right? And then it triggers like a big reward, and a bunch of things happen on the machine, right? And then all the lights turn on again, right? So the player character is going through these light routes, right? They're triggering things happening in the world, different than a channel, different than this, these like bounded metal channels that the balls go through. And then last, there are tiles, right? So there's RODGERS. There's like these 7 tiles that say Rogers, and when you use the ball with the flippers and you hit one of the tiles, the O goes off, and and it actually sinks into this little hole, and then you got to hit the S and you got to hit the G, right? And when you hit Rogers, when you make sure every tile drops, it goes ding 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 ding, and all these things happen, right? So you got tiles that drop, you got routes that go through, right? You got light routes, you got tiles, you got channels, you got routes, right? But the coolest thing in the whole game is a ball that is not the ball that you shoot out of the spring boing at the bottom, right? That you pull back this, this plunger, and then the ball shoots out and it goes into action, right? That's your player character. But there's this ball sitting at the top, all right? And it's an unlockable ball. And when you hit that ball with your ball, that ball goes into action, and now there's 2 balls just dinging around. Bing, bing, bong, bing, 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 bong, bong, right? And I was like, holy cows, right? So you have this traditional ball, and you, the player, set this player character in motion, right? And it goes around, and it does all the things by itself. But in pinball, there's this unlockable ball, a second player character, right? That only comes in when it's unlocked. And it does a whole bunch of activity for a short period of time. And when it goes down and it falls through the flippers, it's out, but you're not done, right? Because your ball is still in motion and still in play, right? And you could keep going. And so you had this unlockable ball, this other player character that wasn't there at the beginning of the game and is not there at the end of play, right? And I was like, we don't have this in Dungeons & Dragons, right? We don't have a player character who in a 20-session campaign comes in at session 6 and leaves at session 9. But why not? Why not? We can, right? We can take inspiration from pinball, right? So what I'm thinking about is an unlockable player, right? So on session 1, you say, hey, you guys have the ability to unlock a player. When you guys are we're starting at level 4, right? If at any point, any of you or all of you together, if any player or any number of players makes the following conditions occur in the game, a new player is unlocked. And you can invite a player to our table who will come in at 4 levels above your own. They will be allied to your group, and they will be specifically allied to the player who unlocked this unlockable player. This unlockable player is your choice. You bring the person in. They show up to our table at whatever session it's going to be. They're unlocked at. They can't be unlocked before session 4, and they can't be unlocked after session 10, right? But we're planning a 20-session, game. And when they're unlocked, you and that person will meet together. You will make your Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition player character together, and that person will come in 4 levels higher than the highest player at that point, right? And they will be given a special magic item, and they will be a rock star among you, and they will play for exactly 1d4 sessions, right? We will roll it the moment they hit the table for the first time, and they will either have 1 night with us or 4 nights with us, and then they are gone, right? The unlockable player, right? I never thought about this for D&D. I think it's a great idea. Not for every table. Like, you know, certainly not. A lot of Dungeon Masters struggle just to deal with the players they got at the table. You're going to need a skilled Dungeon Master to do this. But there's a lot of skilled Dungeon Masters out there, and I think my channel is specifically a subset of highly skilled Dungeon Masters, because we talk about the deepest end of the pool on Dungeons & Dragons. And I think this is a good idea. And I'm also considering, you know, when I could drop in a version of this myself. I'm really interested in the unlockable player. What do you think? What do you think of this idea? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.